Hello class, hello Professor Burns. I'm excited to be here today to inform all of you about American Sign Language, or ASL. Today I will be talking about the origin of ASL, about the language itself, about deaf culture, and why it's important to know ASL. So today I'm going to start with the origin of ASL. It started in 1814 with a man named Thomas Gallaudet. One day, Thomas Gallaudet was at a park, and he saw a little girl playing alone. He wondered why, so he walked over and started talking to her. But soon, he realized the little girl named Alice Cogswell. She was deaf. Thomas Gallaudet wanted to find a way to communicate with her. So he grabbed a stick, and in the sand, he wrote the word hat. He then pointed to his hat. It took Alice a few tries before she finally understood that he was trying to communicate with her. But once she finally understood, she was so excited that she was able to communicate with someone. Alice ran up to show her father, Dr. Cogswell. Dr. Cogswell was excited as well and wanted Thomas Gallaudet to go to London, England to learn sign language so he could bring it back to America and open up an all-deaf school. Thomas Gallaudet arrived in London, England, but he was discouraged when he arrived because all the deaf teachers didn't want anything to do with him. They didn't want to teach him the language, and they didn't want him bringing it over to America. So Thomas Gallaudet called up Dr. Cogswell. Dr. Cogswell told him not to worry, that he will raise more money for Thomas Gallaudet to go to France. Thomas Gallaudet arrived in France and was so excited because all the teachers welcomed him with open arms. Thomas Gallaudet met a man named Laurent Clerc. Laurent Clerc taught him all about sign language, and Laurent also agreed to go back to America with Thomas Gallaudet to help him open up the all-deaf school. The two men stayed in France for 2 months, and then once they arrived to America, in 1817, the first deaf school was opened. It was called the American Asylum in Hartford for the Deaf and Dumb, which was later renamed to the American School for the Deaf. When the school first opened, there was only 6 students. Alice was one of them. But by the time Thomas Gallaudet retired, there was over 100 students that knew how to read and write. And in 1864, there was an all-deaf university opened in Washington, D.C. called Gallaudet University. Now I'm going to talk about the language. When creating a language in ASL, it's different from English. You create a sentence like you're drawing a picture. So it goes object, subject, verb. If I were to say the bird is sitting on the fence, in ASL that would be fence, bird, sits. Another thing that's important in sign language is facial expressions. Deaf people use facial expressions like hearing people use tones in their voice. It just helps the deaf person understand more fully what the person is signing. If a deaf person was mad, they would use facial expressions, but if a hearing person was mad, they would use a tone in their voice. Now I'm going to talk about deaf culture. Deaf culture is a major part in the deaf community. They take pride in their language and they want it to carry on for generations and generations. When communicating with a deaf person, there's a few things you guys should know. One thing is always maintain eye contact when communicating with a deaf person. Maintaining eye contact just lets the deaf person know that you are fully aware to what they're signing. Another thing is you should never interrupt a deaf person when they're signing because that's considered rude. Another thing that's considered rude is if you're a hearing person that knows sign language, you should not use your voice. You should only sign. Now I'm going to tell you guys how to get a deaf person's attention. There's 3 most commonly used ways. The first way is waving your hand like this. When you wave your hand like this, the deaf person can see in their peripheral visions that someone's trying to get their attention. The second way is flashing the lights on and off, on and off. That's a more faster way of getting a deaf person's attention. The last way is stomping your feet. When you stomp your feet, the deaf person can feel the vibrations in the floor. Now I'm going to tell you why it's important to know ASL. It's important to know sign language because you might get the opportunity to help someone. One time, my friends and I, we went to an air show and we saw an older man. He kept signing the words, girl where, over and over again, and he did look distressed. So, my friends and I walked over and asked if he needed any help. He told us that he lost his family and he needed one of us to call his daughter for him. We called his daughter and we helped him find his family again. ASL is also the third most commonly used language in America. First one is English, second one Spanish, and the third one ASL. It's also important to know as many languages as you can because you become more well-versed. Well, I hope you guys learned a lot from my speech. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for Professor Burns for giving me this opportunity.